In this video we're going to take the work we did for worksheet 8 to complete worksheet 9. So we've finished our 3D model and we've added colour, and our aim is to take a screenshot of this and to place it over one of our images from worksheet 6 to give a nice preview of how the building might look in our chosen location. There's a couple of things we need to do to prepare in 123D. The first is to make sure we have perspective ticked. The second is to make sure we have materials only selected. The next is to hide all sketches, which you may or may not have. Obviously you need to set any colors that you want to set in the meantime. And then the last is to change the camera angle to try and match the viewpoint of the image you'll be adding. So it's a good idea to try and flick back and forth between them and rotate the building until it's in roughly the right position. If your photo from worksheet 6 is from the ground, you'll need to move the viewpoint to the ground and zoom in to increase the perspective. So now it looks like we're on the ground looking up at the building. If, like my example, yours is an aerial shot, you'll need to zoom out and move the camera to look from above. Once you're happy that you've got it from the right type of shot, you press the print screen button on a PC or Command Shift 4 on a Mac, and then your job is to transfer that image into Photoshop. Here's one that I prepared earlier. We're going to use the magic wand tool to select the grey background. If we zoom in, we can see there's a couple of bits that didn't select, so holding Shift and clicking on those will add them. Any time spent now making sure the selection is correct, undo that one and turn the tolerance down. We'll save time later on in cleaning up. Okay, so I can now press delete, drag a marquee selection box around what I want, copy, switch to the other picture and paste. Our first job is to go Command T for transform and to shrink it down. Remember, if we hold Shift we stop this type of distortion happening. First job is to get it roughly the right size and the right position, so I think I like mine around that size. If you're having a lot of trouble getting the right type of angle for your building, during a transform you can also right click and do things like skew, which will let you stretch it if you can't quite get the perspective or anything like that, but I'm pretty happy with mine as is. Okay, if we control 0 to zoom out, we can see that the building is in place but it doesn't really integrate into the rest of the picture. So there's a couple of things we're going to do to our layer. First thing is to add some texture. So we're going to go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Something around 2, 3 or 4% is pretty good. Okay, if I zoom in on the building and compare it to everything else around it, you can see now it's got that little bit of texture. So if I show you a before and after, it just helps it bring it down to the quality of the rest of the photo to make it look more integrated. The next problem we need to fix is how bright it is compared to the rest of the picture. It looks like it's pasted in still. So we'll make sure we have our building layer selected, up to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. The main thing you need to do is turn down the saturation. Too far, it'll look black and white. Opposite end of the scale makes it look neon coloured. So probably somewhere around here. We're trying to dull it down to make it look realistic, but not so much that it's boring. So we can tick the preview on and off. See how much better that looks. Not as vibrant, but more realistic. Now that we've done this, we're ready to start adding in other elements. The marking guidelines state that we'll get more marks for making it look as communicative and realistic as possible. So for instance, this building would not be sitting in the middle of the trees. We would have things like pathways underneath driveways to enter it. So I'm going to make a new layer, call it pathways, and I'm going to switch to the paintbrush. I'm going to zoom in on the specific area. I'm going to make my brush a lot smaller, and I'm going to hold the Alt key, which will let me sample the color. Got a nice brown there to match, and now I can start to draw some driveways. If it's coming out faint, you notice that my opacity was set to a low number, so I can undo that. And start to draw where my concrete sections would be. If you want a really straight line, click once, hold the Shift key, click a second time, and it will draw a straight line between the points that you're clicking. Okay, I think I'll have this driveway come through to the other side, and I'll also have some sort of courtyard here. So what I might do is make the cursor bigger, single click there, and just tidy up these ones too. One click, hold Shift. That's much better. Okay, obviously this layer needs to come underneath the building. Okay, a couple of problems once again for this looking not realistic enough. One, the pathway has no texture, so if we come back up to Filter, add noise, it'll apply the exact same setting as it had before. Secondly, the junction between where it starts and ends is very obvious. So if we switch to an eraser with a soft edge, much smaller, I can do a couple of clicks at the start and end just to fade it into what was already there, and now it's a little bit more seamless. The last thing we need to do is to switch to a hard brush, and these trees here, in real life looking from this angle, the top of them would be overhanging the path. We wouldn't have such a crisp line. So if I zoom in and then turn up my flow to 100% and just randomize the pattern along the edge to recreate what would happen in real life, which is the trees hanging over the path. Good idea to change your brush size, to come back and do some extra clicks, otherwise it looks artificial because everything is exactly the same. This one too, get it a little bit more irregular. It's more realistic that way. Okay, we shall zoom out, and now it actually looks like a tree line coming along. It's a lot more realistic. Next thing we will look at is adding textures to our surfaces. So on this building I would like this surface and this surface to be windows. So I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to find a picture of something like a solar panel. It's a lot easier than searching for something like a big skyscraper to get the right angle. So I'm going to select all, copy, come back to my picture and paste. Obviously that's far too big, so Control T to transform. I'm going to rotate it this way and try and get it to match as closely as I can the angle of that surface. I might hit enter to save that one for now and move this one above, and I might quickly magic wand the background away. That will help. Okay, now when I transform again, I can see the bottom and I can start to match up that angle. I think I actually need a little bit less perspective here. So I'm right clicking to bring up those extra options. Okay, that looks roughly like what I want. Okay, I'm going to position that in place. Now if I temporarily turn that off, I'll actually make a copy of this first. Drag it to here, ready for the other window. I'll turn them both off. I'll come to my building layer and now magic wand this surface. Again, holding shift to build it up. Could also do a lasso tool if you wanted it to be really precise. Because as you can see, I'm having trouble getting an exact edge here. That will do for the purposes of this video. Okay, if I turn back on my solar panel level and then I have to go to select inverse, now it's doing everything except that section. I can now press delete and I'm left with the window. Deselect. Okay, the other one is ready to go. Whoops, over here. So I might transform this one again. First thing I'll do is flip it horizontal. And once again, I'm going to transform it until it's roughly in the right place. It won't actually matter to get it exactly when it's finished because it's such a small element in a large picture. Press enter to save that one. Repeat the process. Hide it, select the building layer, and now magic wand. Got that one in one go. Select inverse, switch to my other layer, press delete, and I'm left with just the window. Okay, at the moment they're standing out a little bit too much, so for each of them, hold shift and click to do both. I might turn the opacity down just to fade them in and get some of those colors. And I might even right click and merge that one down and call it Windows. Okay, it's starting to look more integrated, starting to look a little bit more realistic. It's never going to look perfect because we're combining a photo with a computer graphic, but we can work on it. Next thing we're going to do is to add some sort of garden to the roof. So I'm going to select all, copy, paste that in. This is an absolutely enormous file, so I'm going to shrink this down enormously. Maybe I'll use this up here and go to about 20%. And my height also at 20%. That's more like it. Hit enter. Move this one just off to the side. Okay, another way, rather than cutting out like we did with the windows, is to use the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to get this even smaller until this garden here looks like it will more or less fit on top, something like that. I'm going to zoom right in. Okay, so first step is to switch to the building and magic wand the top of it. So now when I'm clone stamping, it's going to be restricted to that area and it won't accidentally overlap the edge. I might even add this surface here because, like with the trees, it will overhang slightly. It'll look more realistic to do it this way. Okay, that will do nicely. I'll make a new layer, call it Gardens. Make sure I have this selected, and then I'm finally ready to come to the clone stamp. Up the top, make sure it's set to sample all layers because we're sampling from the one we've pasted in and painting onto Gardens. So we will hold Alt, click to set our target, and that's probably a little bit too much there, but it has transferred the garden. So now I can deselect, switch to the eraser, start to tidy up that edge. Okay, that's really not too bad. I'm finished with this layer here. I can delete it. Clearly that will work if you wanted to add trees or shrubs or anything else around the building. Okay, getting there. One other image that I did have ready was a picture of some people, and I've already magic wanded out the background and shadows. So now I can select all, copy, switch and paste. Obviously they're far too big, so Command T to transform. They're going to be really quite small. To be correct here. Okay, I'll try and get most of the crowd standing here. And switch to my eraser. I'm going to name this one People. And then start to delete the ones that are on the roof and on the walls and in the trees. Now from a really far shot like this is probably not that effective because you can't tell that they're people. But from a closer up shot where you could identify them as people, could be a nice touch for you to put yours in. Okay, other details that I won't put into this video but would work the same way would be adding in things like doorways, smaller windows. One final thing that I would like to show you is adding some shadow, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. It would be nice to have some shadows off of the back of the building here onto the trees and surrounding area. There's a really simple way to do that, and that is over on the side we have the dodge and burn tools. This one here. So dodge makes something lighter, burn makes something darker. It's a good way to add contour and shadow. So imagine burning, it turns black and darker, gets shadowy. So I'm going to get a much smaller brush. I'm going to have the pathways and hold shift to select the background as well. Nope, can't do it for that tool. So for instance the pathways, you can see I can build up some darkness towards the back of them near the edge of the trees. So I'm just brushing like a paintbrush, and then switch to the background layer, painting. It's going to be fairly subtle, but that's what we want. We want to add subtle things that will add together to make our picture look a lot better. Might also have some shadows on the pathway. It's behind these trees too. Natural to expect them to cast some shadows, and underneath the front of here where the canopy was hanging over. Little touch-ups. Okay, depending on how many other details you are adding, you'll be close to finished here. When you are, there's one other thing you may like to do. It's not compulsory. Before you do that, you would need to flatten your image. And then sometimes you might like to aim for the style where it looks like it's painted by an artist, which is quite often, before these type of architectural projects are done, the type of style they will use. They won't try and get it photorealistic. So the setting is filter, oil paint after we've flattened. Now at the moment that is far too pronounced, so I need to fiddle with the settings. If I do it before and after, you notice that we lose a lot of detail on the work that we've done, but it does have the advantage of making it look more integrated because everything has the same flat texture. It's a personal preference if you want to go for this artistic style or photorealistic style, something that you can choose before you hand yours in. Final thing you might like to do is just give it a little bit more oomph. So if we go image, adjustments, and then curves, we'll have this one here. Quite often you'll push up that and pull down this to boost the mid-range colors. Okay, so if we do it before and after, you can see it's given it a little bit more lift, and our picture is done. Make sure you save for web as a JPEG and leave it really big for detail for when it's printed.